Hello, everyone. Welcome to another session of Healthy X Sundays podcast, where we bring you the most important and actionable information in the field of nutrition and wellness. I'm your host, Dave from Mind Muscle Project, and joining me today as the co host is Kunal Jain, also known as the Veg Diet Coach. And today we have a special guest, Mr. Zsolt from Australia.
Hi there. Hi, guys.
Zolt, uh, tell us a bit about yourself and your personal journey. Uh, like how and when did your journey in the field of nutrition and wellness begin?
Well, I had a quite interesting journey because up until I was 40, not much really happened, or didn't know too much about it. Just like any person who listened to the TV or just listening to the mainstream experts. It's mainly because I always lived a healthy lifestyle. I was playing football when I was a kid, and also my mom is an amazing cook, so I grew up on homemade food, amazing food. So health and wellness was not really on my radar because it wasn't really an issue among my peers as well. It wasn't so much issue with obesity and metabolic issues. So nothing really happened up until I was 40 when I did my first water fasting experiment. And yeah, I wanted to go for 3 days on my very first journey, and I ended up doing 7 days because I just had such an amazing feeling and transformation on this first fasting experience that I just couldn't believe what an amazing transformation the body is going through. So I became like very curious, what actually happened to the body, and like why is it feel so great. So yeah, I got into the fasting lifestyle and really wanted to find out more about it, and why nobody talks about this, and why experts are like threatening with this, like, oh, you cannot go without food for more than 5 hours, and just you have all this nonsense what is actually in your head. Like, I truly believe that, like, you have to eat every 4 hours. So it was a big eye opener for me, and that's when I got the journey to really find out the truth about it. That, well, how come people cannot lose weight, and why so much information and misinformation out there. So I really wanted to find out the truth, and I spent, I would say, the last 5 years just to like deep diving into the field of not just nutrition, but also that was related to the health and wellness. So yeah, deep dive into the health and the history of health and wellness as well. So I really wanted to understand the big picture, and who is speaking the truth. So yeah, that's in a nutshell how it started, and now I'm just seeing like very differently. So I said not just a dieting word, but also what makes us healthy.
Interesting. So, after digging so deep into the field of nutrition and wellness, what realizations did you have about mainstream nutrition? Like, what do you think is going on?
Everything is backwards. That's what it seems like. Look, when I decided to really find out what's going on, I looked at the history of nutrition science. So how we got to this point when we have so much data, knowledge, and information available, yet everybody seemed to be confused, and everybody just singing their own songs, to which diet is the best. So yeah, I really wanted to deep dive, and wanted to find out, going back into the 18th century, to okay, how this concept of metabolism started, and just evolution, how we became um, more, understanding more nutrition science. And look, the big shift happened is after the Second World War, when the center of nutrition science from Europe moved to the United States. And this is where all this massive confusion just started in a public, because yes, the mainstream nutrition science has been captured by corporate interest. And unfortunately, since the Second World War, we can say that nutrition science is mainly a marketing and public relation tool for the big corporations. So really got to be careful what sort of studies and you're reading, and what sort of people you follow, because it's really hard to tell, especially for a layman, which science, study is actually real study or just a propaganda from, from the big boys. So if anybody wants to find out more about it, I would recommend to go back to the 1920s and 30s and 40s, and uh, to look up what people were thinking about it, and you can find a lot of interesting things. And I think you can put like a fuller picture together when you're going back to those times when nutrition science was not so influenced by corporate interest.
Yeah, you hit the bullseye with this one. So we all knew this, but money is essentially what's driving the whole nutrition and wellness industry. It's what is most profitable that's making it out there into mainstream information.
Yes, and that's why we have to be careful, like for any, I would say, layperson to really decide who we are listening to. And probably what I would recommend to everybody is to listen to everybody who you find interesting, and put your truth and your picture together. Because yes, it's just so much influence, corporate interest out there in the nutrition field and a health field as well, that it's really hard to find the truth, and it takes time, and really need to find the people who are curious. They're not pushy for an agenda or for a diet, but they have this curiosity about the human body and nutrition. So yeah.
Going to our main topic of discussion today, uh, how do you define metabolic flexibility, or how do you define metabolism for a start? Then, how do you define metabolic flexibility?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, because the current main street weight loss industry is really focusing on the paradigm of calories in, calories out. And because the whole question people are asking is how much calorie deficit you're creating. But I think that's when you focus on the weight loss, and that one is that paradigm is looking at the human body in a very mechanistic way, meaning where you just have to control the energy in, energy out, because that's how our heat engine does. So the human metabolism, according to the current mainstream paradigm, is revolves around energy in, energy out. And that's a very mechanistic way of looking at the body and metabolism. But we know that metabolism actually is not really regulated by calories, but regulated by anabolism and catabolism. So that's the two main components of metabolism, that we're building energy, that we build in the body, and we're releasing energy. So it's really important to looking at the metabolism as this dual unit, when they're complementing each other, and the balance is the health. So what we want to do is the anabolic and a catabolic part, when nutrition and elimination is in balance with each other. So I think that's the very important paradigm to shift, what we need to take into consideration, because the current one with the weight loss and the calorie, focusing on calorie deficit, it doesn't really understand it. So you need to change the understanding that metabolism is actually is an anabolic catabolic engine, and we need to focus on the catabolic part, because this is when we actually breaking down um, the fat. So metabolic flexibility is quite a new term. I think in studies only started to appear in the 90s, when they described people who have diabetes and obesity as metabolically inflexible, meaning that they cannot access the stored fat. So they're pretty much they stuck, and they have to eat every few hours because they're not metabolically flexible. They're metabolically inflexible. And yeah, like in the mainstream science, this term only started to appear, I would say, in the last couple of years, and now it's coming to the more um, into the spotlight. But basically, metabolic flexibility means that your ability to switch between glucose and fat. So this is our two main fuel sources, and if you're flexible, then you can run on more glucose, and you can run on more fat as well. You're not depending on any of them, and I think that's what gives you, that's the holy grail of fat loss, that we can burn glucose, we can run on fat as well, we can run on stored fat. So that's the main thing what we need to focus on, is to be metabolically flexible and allowing the body to run on stored fat.
Alright. So on the other end, like you spoke a lot about the calorie in, calorie out approach. That's the mainstream stuff. But there is another
Mm,
there's another popular school of thought these days. The diet tribes like carnivore, keto is
mhm,
quite old in that sense. Keto, carnivore, low carb, right? And people seem to have got benefits out of it, and like I personally can vouch for that. So when we
mm.
get into the metabolic flexibility things of things, do you recommend these things as a long term diet or something that should be used to recover from health? And once you are sort of recovered, do you recommend them going back to a, somewhere in the middle, somewhere find a sweet spot? So, what do you recommend?
Now, look, I think if you want to focus on fat loss, we're gonna focus on a catabolic part. So when actually the body is, breaking down the stored fat. And what I noticed on my journey, on my fasting journey, that yeah, in the last, I would say, 5 years, I regularly fasting every few times a year, going anything between 3 days to 7 days, and I do this for a maintenance, for just for a reset, to come back into balance, and just get rid of the toxins and things which doesn't need to be there anymore. And during this time, it's it goes anything between 3 days to 7 days. So it's build up enough flexibility that my body is very comfortable on running on stored fat. And that's why I think the key is once you're able to do a few long fast, then your metabolism is become like so flexible that it switches automatically um, to the stored fat without you noticing it. Like it's not even an issue. It's, think about like a runner, like somebody who's running marathons. Running 45K. For them, running 5K is nothing. For me, 5K would be a bit of an achievement. Because I don't really run, because I don't have that running, memory and running muscle for my body to get used to it. And the same thing goes with fasting. If you do a few longer fast, then you're not even noticing when you're doing intermittent fasting. And then that's why I say that fasting is not really, fasting is, is not really just burning the calories, but you're burning your ego as well. you know, it's yeah, it's a full process. You cleaning up, when you're doing your fasting journey. You cleaning the body, you cleaning the emotions. Um, you're cleaning your mind as well. So it's a very a wholesome process. And when you do that during fasting, then I would say the eating or what you eat is pretty much common sense, because then you want to have the good food. That's you want to maintain it, because if you're doing a fast, you cannot really eat junk food because the body just cannot do that. So you're forcing yourself to eat good food, and whether if it's keto or carnivore, it's completely up to the individual. But yeah, I think the most important thing is if your goal is fat loss, is to focusing on a fasting schedule. When you have like a certain time when you spend time without food, and once that's that you have some understanding where you're gonna fast, then it's much easier to fill up the gaps with the food what you want to eat, and something what is suiting your metabolism and your goals.
All right. So
Yeah.
I have an interesting question. You can say it's a
Yep.
stupid question. So, according to you, what is an ideal diet? Is it plant based, animal based, low carb, high carb? So, what is an ideal diet? Is there such a thing as an ideal diet?
Look, in my view, whatever works for you. I'm really not dogmatic on anything. Whatever works for you, and I think it really changes as well. Like in your 30s, you might need a different thing to eat than in your something in your 50s or in your 60s. For women, it might be different, and for them different as well. Like before the cycles or after the cycles. So I think as long as it's real food, it's traditional food, a food that our grandparents were eating. I think it's that's the main thing, and within that, how you do that, I think it's whatever works for you. So that's why I call my Twitter the never diet, because I really believe it's we don't have to diet. That's the ultimate diet, when you don't have to diet. And yeah, just think of like an animal which lives in the wild. Um, they don't diet. A tiger eats what the tiger meant to eat. And I know that we are a bit more complex, but yeah, because they're connected to their instinct and connected to to nature. They know what to eat, and I think we have the same wisdom as well. We just being dumbed down, and that's why people are so confused about what's actually working for them.
One of the things you call, one of the things you call, or almost one of the things you say often is never get married to a diet, right? So
That's right.
yeah, so we have to think from all perspectives, and we cannot be ignorant, so we have to critique everything. So where do you think this low carb, keto, carnivore kind of approach is going wrong? Like, we have to look into the downsides of those two. So we
Sure, sure,
want to
sure.
hear your take also.
Sure. Look, I think keto diet is fantastic to get started on a metabolic health journey, because you're focusing on more fat, so you're gonna have easier for you to um, access the stored fat. That the transition is easier because you're getting into ketosis easier. So I think keto diet was quite a revolutionary in the nutrition space. And what the interesting things is, it was invented in the 1920s, and yet it was forgotten for a long time, and it just came into the public conscious in the late 90s or early 2000s. So I think it's a very interesting that, and I think it's a great first step for great metabolic health. Um, I think once you know keto, once you can do keto, then this is when you can move into the next stage, which is the fasting, because that's help you to become more metabolically flexible even more. So they're just like an evolution. And as I saw from like experts on Twitter, what they usually recommend is keto and intermittent fasting. And I think for anybody who starts out, I think that's a great first step. That combining keto and implementing intermittent fasting to start to build up the metabolic flexibility. The carnivore diet, I don't know much about it, to be honest. Just as much as I'm seeing on Twitter. I never tried it. I think it's for people who hate um, people who have like gut issues and all.
Yeah, it's
I
commonly
think carnivore diet is
suggested
great.
for those with
The-
autoimmune conditions and gut issues. That's the main beneficiaries of this carnivore diet.
Exactly, exactly. So if you have an issue and your gut is inflamed for whatever reason, then I think when you're stripping down everything from a nutrient and you just go back to the very basics, I think carnivore can work really great. However, in my personal view, the more extreme the diet, the sicker you are, the more extreme diet you need in the long term. So once you heal yourself and once I think the autoimmune condition or the gut condition gone, I think carnivore diet is no longer needed. So this is when you can build up, some more flexibility in food and just slowly introducing food what your body can actually handle. So that's why I'm saying never marry to a diet, because it might work for you right now, but in 10 years time it might not work for you at all, and I think that's where this whole self-righteousness in the diet industry, the diet space comes in, because everybody's so self-righteous about their diet.
Hmm.
But I think if you're just taking a step back and just have a bit of humility and to see the big picture, is you realize that is for many people many different things are working. Vegetarian diet is the same thing. It has a very good purpose, and I think it's a great purpose what it has. I think it's completely misunderstood these days with this whole modern veganism. I don't think they do it for the right thing, but I think the traditional veganism has a lot of merit, and I see why people do it. I'm not vegetarian, nor carnivore, not keto. I'm just pretty much, yeah, eating food what my mom is used to make similar food.
Alright. So you strongly you strongly advocate for fasting. You yourself fast for 3 days, 7 days, I guess. So what fasting duration do you recommend for most people? Obviously, the first thing people ask when we recommend fasting or we mention about fasting is, will I lose muscle? And you yourself
Mm,
mentioned that fasting is a catabolic process, so that is a valid concern. So shed some light on this, and what is an
of course.
ideal fasting period for beginners and intermediates?
Look, it depends also for who as well, right? It's like I'm in my mid 40s, so probably if I was in my 20s, fasting wouldn't have big on my radar. So if your main concern is maximizing your muscle, probably fasting is not the good time right now, because obviously you might lose some muscle, although you're not losing not the muscle but you're losing the most, but because the body is intelligent. But certain muscle you lose, but also you can build it up quickly. So this is the thing, like I'm living this water fasting lifestyle, working out a bit, not too much, maybe like twice a week. And yeah, I'm able to maintain like a very healthy body fat and body composition. So if the main goal is bodybuilding, probably wouldn't be the main thing what I would recommend. But if anybody wants to use for general health, for holistic health, and just practice to be without food, then probably the very first step I would recommend is to try with a 1 day fast. I think that's a good psychological barrier to break through as well. If you're doing a 1 day fast, um, and after that, the next stage is a 3 day fast. I think a 3 day fast is when the big shift happens, when really the stored fat become the main fuel source, and not just the liver, but also the brain is switching into ketones. And when the brain is running on ketones, that's just a really magical experience, like consciousness wise, because this is actually coming from an evolutionary perspective that when the caveman didn't have food for the caveman for a few days, we were fasting. When his brain was switching into ketones, it had to be sharp. That's why you're alert. You had to be sharp food. Um, that's you're very um, after the 3 days. And after that, yeah, my longest fast went for like 10 days. But some guys in the group, in the in a fasting Facebook group, they're going 30, 40-day fast. So I'm not saying longer is better, but you have to find your way of what actually works for you. I think the sweet spot for anybody who doesn't want to heal, doesn't have any particular issue, is I would recommend is a 3-day fast. So the 3-day fast does that full, I would say, maintenance cleaning, what people would need. So I would go 1-day fast and a 3-day fast. Like that's, I think, the two main thing which really people can benefit, and realistic as well for most people.
Right. So, what benefits have you particularly seen uh, through fast in yourself and in people who you recommend fasting? Like, what benefits have you seen in particular?
I think this is the part what people want to get to is you're gonna have food freedom, meaning that you don't have to really restrict and your diet, and you don't really have to restrict what you're gonna eat, because your metabolism is on the right track. And I think that's give you this food freedom when you eating instinctively how you always eaten. So I think that's the main thing that you don't have to worry about now anymore. Macro ratios and calorie deficits, and yeah, you don't have to worry about the details if you're not, you're not needed for like performance or like for sport, for like, if for most people, for like everyday people, I think the ultimate dream for them is to have this food freedom when they're maintaining the weight without much hassle. I think that's food freedom is the ultimate what everybody wants. And I think when you're living the fasting lifestyle, this is where it leads you to, that you're getting back into your instinct, and you learn to eat food which is good for you. Your body's telling you it's good for you. So I think that's the main benefit to give you this food freedom and metabolic flexibility.
Kunal wants to add something.
Sure.
Yeah, so amazing conversation going on. I would just like to ask a few follow-up questions on fasting. Like,
Sure.
are there any benefits of intermittent fasting or a time restricted fasting? Like people, they want to eat in a window of 6 to 8 hours a day and then fast for the rest of the day in 24 hours. So is that also something you have experimented with, or do you recommend that?
Well, look, I think if the goal is, fat loss, I think this intermittent fasting is a really good first step. And when you increasing the window, when you running on fat, on stored fat, and you're not depending on food to get energy. And the main organ what we have to focus on is the liver. So the liver is shift anything around 12 to 16 hours from a glucose burning mode to a fat burning mode, when just completely shifts into you're burning your mainly your stored fat. So I think the main benefit of this is to get start the liver to switch to stored fat, and not get stuck in a glucose burning mode and be metabolically inflexible. So I think this intermittent fasting is a really great step. If somebody wants to take you to the next step, and just experiment um, for health benefits, then I would recommend the experiment with the longer fasting.
Great.
Yeah.
And just a couple of more questions.
Yeah.
People generally say that, okay, during a fast, you can have something which is like electrolytes, or you can have black coffee or green tea, anything zero calorie stuff. So is that a part of fasting? Do you recommend any of those things?
Yeah, it's so many different ways people doing it. When I'm doing it, and when I'm consulting people with fasting, I recommend just go with water. You know, I'm a bit hardcore. You know, it's because, as I mentioned, is not just you want to actually yeah, just come back to the very basics, and you just be with water, and just be on that. And if, especially if you're drinking like spring water, they got all the electrolytes. That's how got got my own spring water from this local company, because when I was getting to the fasting lifestyle, I was looking for the best type of water I could get during my fasting. And that's when I came across spring water, natural spring water, which has all the electrolytes and fresh coming from the ground. So that's what I'm drinking since, because that just has everything what the body needs during fasting. So yeah, that's why I don't recommend any kind of flavors and any kind of little stimulants or pacifiers. Just be with water. Have a good quality water, but just be with water.
Great, thanks. Just the last one. Do you recommend fasting for everyone, or there are some conditions or some people who should not actually fast?
Oh, for sure, for sure. Many people, I think, is there are many people are not at the stage of fasting yet because they're so metabolically inflexible and so much toxin in the body that they just cannot spend more than 5 hours without food. So it's not for definitely not for everybody. You have to work up yourself to be that stage to try to do with the intermittent fasting. But I think, yeah, this is our natural state. Like our ancestors were metabolically flexible. They had to fast because they had no choice. There was sometimes there was plenty of food, sometimes there was nothing. So they had to be good on to run without food. And I think this is the skill or the property what we lost in these modern times, because people just so addicted to food that they cannot really access the stored fat. They cannot run on their own fat storage. So yeah, there's a lot of things to be done.
Thanks. Over to you, Dave.
So one question I have is this keto diet we spoke of earlier. The
Mm.
keto diet originally started out as a fast mimicking diet.
Mm.
So if you had to choose one of these, not obviously you would prefer fasting, but for the not average population, if you have somebody has to choose between a keto diet and fasting, what would you suggest? What do you think is a better option?
I think it depends where you are at. I think keto diet probably would be like a primary school, and fasting would be the high school. So just the different stages where you are, where anybody is. So um, yeah, it's nothing better or worse. I think you just if it works for you at that stage where you are at, and it helps you and it works for you, and you feel great and you are healthy
So
metabolically. Yeah,
there is this at least there is this thought among people that keto means very high on fat and you can have unlimited quantity of fat,
yeah,
and even if it is fat, even if it doesn't have much of an insulin response, I would assume that is anabolic in nature because of the sheer quantity of calories or mass or food you're consuming, right? So
exactly. It's food. Every food is anabolic, and right, it's fast. Fat is raising insulin as well, not that much as carbohydrate, but every food is an anabolic activity, and I think that's why it's so important to if to shift the focus from the anabolic part, from the macros to the catabolic part. Is when do we start to access our first the stored carbohydrate and then the stored fat. So that's why I think we need to shift. And fine tuning the anabolic part. You mean the diet is I think it's very personal, and everybody has to do their own work on themselves to find out actually working for them.
So one final
But yeah,
question.
as I said, when it comes to like
Yeah.
really fat loss, mm, sorry, just when it comes
So
to
one
fat loss,
final.
I think it just the category
Uh-huh.
part.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
done.
yeah. So the final question is, how is the metabolic scene over there in Australia? Because we are asking this because we are so far away from Australia, right here in India, but we always had a relation with Australia. Like we, anybody who's followed cricket, are huge fans of what is happening in
Yeah,
Australia. We
and
guys follow, and we always thought
yeah,
of you guys as
massive.
well built, yeah, massive guys, huge guys, the Matthew Haydens. So, what is the metabolic
Yeah,
scene over there? What's going on as far as people's health are
I think
concerned
in a way
over there?
was very good.
Is it
This
same?
country loved. No,
Yeah,
look, the generally was really good because it's there's a lot of outdoor activities, and it's not just like in a park, but like a lot of surf and um, yeah, a lot of rugby, a lot of footy. So Australia in general is quite a sporty nation, but when I'm reading, like how it actually changed, it really changed quite dramatically in the last 20 years, and it's become like much worse thanks to the American culture and all this junk food, which is now pretty much everywhere. So definitely especially among the young generation, the metabolic health issues is getting worse and worse, just like in America and like in the
and
Western countries. So it started really well, Australia, but unfortunately, it's going downhill.
like Australia and New Zealand are very famous for their the quality of produce, right? Like the veggies, the fruits, even meat. The
Amazing,
quality is, yeah, it's
amazing.
amazing. So, uh,
Amazing quality indeed, but when you walk into the shopping center, you pretty much find the same thing what you find like in any American shopping center. So it's yeah, you have to find the right source. You have to find your right farmer, and businesses who selling good products.
so this was a very insightful session in general, and regarding you gave us very useful insights on metabolic health and metabolic flexibility in general. So I think, Kunal, we can take some questions now. So if anybody got any questions, please uh, come forward. We'll hand over the mic to you.
You can also type in your questions. There's a small a box at the bottom right corner. If you're on the mobile phone, you can also type in your question.
uh, if there are not many questions, if there are not much questions, then I would like to ask some questions to you. Like,
Sure.
so yeah. So we had discussions in the past regarding Indian way of food, and I actually find it interesting, the Indian traditional Indian way of food preparation and all that. So what do you think of it? What do you think, like, where do you think we are going wrong, at least from your perspective? I know you have a lot of friends and you interact with a lot of Indians here on Twitter, so, or X. So what do you think we are going wrong with such a heritage and such wisdom in uh, nutrition and health?
Yeah, interesting. Look, to be honest, I don't really know much about it because I've never been to India. Never really did like deep dive into it. The only thing I'm seeing is from you guys, what you guys commenting and sort of discussions, what's happening on Twitter. So just have my, assumption, but I don't know how, accurate is that just based on the Twitter. But my understanding, vegetarian culture is pretty strong there, and yeah, people, pretty much eating carbs with carbs. They don't eat any meat, and like in later in life, like not really keeping in
You,
balance the carb consumption with your activity. this is when it's gonna be a problem because yeah, carbohydrate is like a fuel, like a turbo. It's a quick and burns quickly. The fat is the more like a cruise control. So when people eating just you know, this fuel source, this carbohydrate, then if it's not matching their activity level, that's when they have like issues, metabolic issues. Differently than Americans. Because I think the skinny fat is not really a phenomenon in the United States, but what I heard in India is quite common. So I think that's one of the
Uh,
main issue there.
Yeah, we tend to have lower protein intakes. People here consume very little protein compared to America or the West. Like protein consumption is much higher over there, so there is that aspect of muscle mass and all. But in
Y-
India, it's very low. We have very low consumption of protein, and whatever protein we are consuming is more or less secondary sources, not from quality animal sources.
Right, because yeah, obviously the vegetarian, culture has a big influence on it, and that's why probably, eating meat is not so common like in the Western countries. So yeah, it can be an issue if the protein is not.
One more question is
Mm.
uh, you did so much research in this field. You dig deep, found out so much about nutrition and health in general. So if any of our audience is interested in going down the same path, they want to, you know, get down to this thing. I want to understand what the hell is really happening, and keep away all the nonsense information. Like, what can you point out in the direction of some, like, point to some resources for the same, like books or podcast or whatever it is? Like, how do they truly, like, move away from what is said in the mainstream to actually get to the bottom of nutrition science?
Look, if somebody wants to like understand the history, like, from going from point to point and just see the evolution of understanding of how we evolved and our understanding of food, then probably I would start with Gary Taubes, who is an amazing researcher, and his books are so detailed in science, in nutrition science and science as well, that yeah, I find his books are very fascinating. Um, I'm not necessarily agree everything with him, but I really do respect him because I don't think anybody knows more about the history of nutrition science and diabetes than Gary. Like he's just an absolute machine. So if anybody just wanna learn about the history and just like see the evolution, I think he's a really really good person to dive into and just dive into his work and just like studying, the evolution of science. Yeah, that would be the main guys. And as I said, like, if anybody's really interested, like in good sources, I would go back in the 90s, 30s, and 40s. So Weston Price, probably the name which most people heard of.
Mm-hmm,
Um, so Weston Price is an amazing source. There is another gentleman. His name is Dr. Royal Lee.
mm-hmm,
Um, Royal Lee was a scientist as well, but from the 20s. So he was an inventor. He had like 100 different patents. Like he had like so many things that he discovered, like invented, and from that he moved into the into science and nutrition science to really understand how actually the human body works from an engineer
mm-hmm.
perspective. And yes, he's absolutely amazing. So that's another really interesting person to read about. So yeah, if you're looking at the 1920s, 1930s, the main
Right.
and the keeping it simple.
So I so
Henry Beeler is another one. Sorry.
Mhm. So I guess it's best to follow the timeline. Start from the 90s or even before that, and just work your way through and see what has happened and why is this happening, who is making the money, all that stuff. And you follow the trail and you will understand what is truth, what is the real deal.
I have a question.
Yep. Yep.
So, so Zsolt, people generally realize that fasting is beneficial, maybe at some point of time when they are going through some metabolic health crisis. Usually, then when people start researching about what's going on. So, is fasting
Mhm.
something which is useful to heal your body, or is it something which the young people should start early on and make it a lifestyle?
You mean like young people who are not healthy?
No, who are healthy people who are just going through their life. Um,
Uh,
is it something for them as well, fasting, or is it only for
to be honest,
metabolically ill people?
look, I don't think it's just for people who have metabolic issues. I think fasting is for anybody who's like adult. I would say, like, if it's still like the growth phase, I wouldn't recommend to anybody, and probably like 25 or maybe 30. Yeah, depending on the growth phase. Unless there is like a issue what need to be solved. But that's why I'm saying is fasting is definitely not for everybody. Um, and especially for young people because they're still at growth stage. That's just my opinion now. Might change later if I'm reading something or I'm hearing something. But at this stage, yeah, I would not really recommend it for people, especially lifestyle wise, for younger people like in the 20s.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
do we have any questions? Anyone? If you have any questions, please, we can put you on the mic, or you can just type out your questions. It seems there are no questions, so I think we can wind this up, Kunal. So, a
Awesome.
very good
Yeah,
session today.
yeah, definitely excellent session. And I see Mrs. Thomas, she's joined. So, ma'am, do you have any questions? Okay. Yeah. No questions, I suppose.
Uh, anyone? Anyone with questions? So I guess we can wind it up. Excellent session. Thanks for coming, Zolt. Very informative.
Mm.
We got to learn a lot about metabolic flexibility and a bit of history of stuff. And we surely want you for another session sometime. We'll have a detailed discussion on various other topics. So we'll definitely do that
Awesome. No,
sometime. Uh,
for
so
sure. Awesome, guys. Thank you so much. It
anyone
was absolute pleasure.
okay, it seems like okay, and so we'll be uploading this session on YouTube as well on our YouTube channel. So you can catch up the session. You can always comment those any questions down there as well. You can please share this session with your family and friends. We'll be doing this more often. So thank you everyone. Thanks for coming. Kunal.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much, Zolt, for your time and amazing insights. And thanks everyone for listening in.
Awesome. Yes, thank you guys for so much.